In today's video, I want to talk about why conventional marriage counseling fails neurodiverse couples. Imagine you and your spouse finally decide to seek help. You walk into the marriage counselor's office hopeful, maybe even relieved. Someone is finally going to help you understand each other. And within 15 minutes, the therapist turns to the autistic partner and says, look into your wife's eyes and repeat back what you hear her say. And then the therapist turns to the neurotypical partner and says, your spouse needs to show empathy for how you feel. And suddenly, the room fills with tension. The autistic spouse feels overwhelmed, confused, maybe even ashamed. And the neurotypical spouse feels unseen and invalidated again. The therapist thinks he's using evidence-based techniques, but something inside this neurodiverse couple is breaking. And here's the painful truth. For most neurodiverse couples, conventional marriage counseling doesn't just fail. It can actually make the relationship worse. Not because the couple isn't trying, not because there isn't love, but because traditional counseling models were never designed for neurodiverse nervous systems. The I feel statements and love languages, you might as well speak Russian. Today, we're going to talk about why this doesn't work. We're going to examine the clinical assumptions built on traditional marriage therapy. And we're going to talk about why techniques like active listening, I feel statements, love languages often backfire for autistic neurotypical couples. And most importantly, we're going to reframe what's really happening. Because in many neurodiverse marriages, the problem is not lack of love or lack of care or lack of willingness. It's a hardware mismatch between two nervous systems. Now we're going to talk about why most marriage counseling models were built for neurotypical couples. Most mainstream marriage counseling models, whether it's emotionally focused therapy, Gottman method techniques, standard communication training, they share a common assumption. They assume both partners operate with similar emotional processing. This framework relies heavily on three expectations: rapid emotional recognition, intuitive empathy, and real-time emotional reciprocity. For neurotypical couples, this often works. But for most autistic partners, those expectations are neurologically unrealistic. Autistic cognition processes information very differently. Instead of a rapid emotional decoding, autistic brains often rely on conscious analysis rather than automatic intuition. Instead of reading emotional cues instantly, autistic individuals may need time to interpret social information. Instead of responding immediately, they may need processing time and space. But traditional therapy rooms rarely allow for that. Instead, the autistic partner is pushed into exercises designed for neurotypical social reflexes. And when those exercises don't work, the therapist often concludes something very harmful. He or she may assume that the autistic partner is emotionally avoidant or defensive or not trying hard enough. Or how about pathological demand avoidance? Have you ever heard that one? Okay. But what the therapist is actually seeing is neurological overload. Let's talk about the active listening exercise that backfires. We're going to look at one of the most common tools used in marriage counseling, active listening. In a typical counseling session, it looks something like this. One partner speaks, the other partner must immediately repeat back what they heard. Then they must validate the emotional experience of the speaker. This sounds reasonable on paper, but for many autistic individuals, this task requires managing 4 neurological processes simultaneously. The autistic husband has to track the content of what was said, monitor facial expressions and tone coming from the NT wife, translate emotional meaning, generate an appropriate response all in real time. And here's the problem with that. When the autistic husband is under emotional stress, his nervous system is already working overtime. The demand for immediate social interpretation pushes his brain into cognitive overload. So instead of fostering connection, which that was the hope, the exercise triggers something else. Shutdown, or withdrawal, or flat responses that the neurotypical wife interprets as indifference. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to understand my feelings. Meanwhile, the therapist interprets the autistic partner's struggle as resistance, and the neurotypical wife begins to feel even more alone. So what started as a technique meant to build empathy becomes an experience that reinforces the worst fear both partners have. The autistic partner feels, I'm failing again. And the neurotypical partner feels, he just doesn't care. But neither of those interpretations is actually accurate. Now we're going to talk about when therapy accidentally gaslights neurodiverse couples. Now here's where things become particularly painful. When conventional therapy fails, the neurodiverse couple often internalizes the failure. The neurotypical wife may start believing, okay, well, he just refuses to meet me emotionally. And the autistic husband may start believing, no matter how hard I try, I'll never get it. I'll never be enough. I can never meet her expectations. I might as well forget about it. And sometimes the therapist unintentionally reinforces this narrative. He or she may say something like, whoa, you just need to lean into the emotions. Or, you need to sit with your partner's feelings. Okay? Yeah, but those statements assume something critical. Those statements assume that the autistic partner has the same neurological capacity for real-time emotional attunement. And when that capacity is different, not absent, just different, those expectations become impossible standards. And when someone is asking repeatedly to meet an impossible standard, they eventually feel like a failure. They feel stupid. Many autistic husbands I've worked with say the same damn thing after traditional therapy. They say, well, I went to counseling to save my marriage and left feeling like a defective human being. And many neurotypical wives say something equally heartbreaking. They say like, well, I thought therapy would finally help my husband understand me, but it only made him shut down more. This is the moment when many neurodiverse couples begin to lose hope. Not because their marriage is doomed, but because the framework designed to help was never built for their nervous systems. Now we're going to talk about the hardware mismatch framework. Let's reframe what's actually happening. In many neurodiverse relationships, the problem is not lack of love or lack of caring. It's a difference in neurological architecture. Think of it like two computers running different operating systems. Both computers are powerful. Both computers are capable, but their software processes information differently. The neurotypical nervous system prioritizes social emotional processing, whereas the autistic nervous system prioritizes analytical processing and sensory management. Neither system is wrong. But when therapists expect both partners to behave the same way emotionally, they unintentionally create a situation where one partner is constantly being measured against the wrong standard. So instead of asking, well, why aren't you responding emotionally? A better question is, how does your nervous system process emotional information? When we shift that conversation this way, something remarkable happens. Shame begins to dissolve. The autistic partner realizes, well, okay, my brain isn't broken, I'm just wired differently. And the neurotypical wife realizes, okay, well, he isn't withholding empathy, he just processes connection way differently. Now the conversation moves from blame to understanding. Now I want to talk about why neurodiverse couples need a different framework. Healthy support for neurodiverse couples looks very different from traditional counseling. Instead of forcing immediate emotional reciprocity, we prioritize nervous system safety. Instead of demanding spontaneous empathy, we create structured communication tools. Instead of pushing through overload, we allow processing time. For example, instead of real-time emotional discussions, couples might use written reflection first. Instead of immediate validation, partners might use delayed response windows to process information. Instead of interpreting shutdown as rejection, they learn to recognize it as neurological overwhelm. Now, these adjustments may sound small, but they change everything. Because once both partners understand the neurological realities involved, they stop trying to force themselves into a system that was never designed for them. And when that happens, something powerful emerges. It's called compassion. The neurotypical wife begins to see that her husband's silence isn't indifference. And the autistic husband begins to see that his NT wife's emotional intensity isn't criticism. Both partners begin learning the same truth, and that is this: we're not enemies. We're just operating different nervous systems. Now here's a little bit of hope after all that. If you're watching this after a painful experience in traditional marriage counseling, I want you to hear this very clearly. Your marriage is not screwed just because traditional therapy didn't work. Your relationship simply needs a different framework. Neurodiverse couples don't fail therapy because they lack love. They fail therapy because most therapy models assume two neurotypical nervous systems. And when we understand the neurological differences involved, we stop forcing couples into impossible expectations, and we begin designing solutions that actually work, solutions that respect both partners, solutions that account for sensory limits, processing differences, and emotional timing, and most importantly, solutions that replace blame with understanding. Because at the heart of so many neurodiverse marriages, the real story isn't emotional neglect. The real story is two people who care deeply for each other, but were never given a map for how their nervous systems interact. And once couples finally receive that map, The relationship often begins to make sense for the first time. Now, if this video resonated with you, you're not alone. Many neurodiverse couples experience the exact same confusion and frustration after traditional therapy. Now, on this channel, we talk about how to rebuild connection using frameworks that actually respect neurological differences. So if you'd like more tools like this, consider subscribing. And if you're in a neurodiverse marriage, I'd love to hear from you. I read and respond to all comments. What has been your experience with traditional marriage counseling? Because the more we talk about this, the more we replace outdated clinical assumptions with real understanding. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.